And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, Meteorologist Joel Curtis with your marine weather, issued on Wednesday, April 2nd. Starting out with our sea ice edge, the sea ice edge has not been moving a whole lot lately, and with a northerly wind and some colder temperatures, we don't expect it to move a whole lot in the next few days either. Those colder temperatures are not going to allow wind wave erosion, and also that the sea state is going to be very, very light right near the ice edge due to no fetch distance because of the northerly winds. Starting out with tonight's weather, there's our northerly winds. There's a major weather system taking off well south of Coal Bay, almost off our surface map there. Also, we've got a couple of high pressure systems, 1035 south of the far western Aleutians, and then also inland we have a 1028 over northwest Canada. That low to the south is 979 millibars, and another high south of Vancouver Island, about 1024 or so. And then on Thursday, those highs start to lose a little bit of their strength because this major weather system is coming up at about 969 millibars. And then there's 1031 still south of the far western Aleutians. Now you can notice the occluded front is starting to move up. That trough that's out there is it's kind of a front that went aloft, and there's a distinct cold side to it. So look for, in your marine waters, lots of snow showers out over the eastern Bering Sea, and those will be hitting Dutch Harbor area and all of the eastern and even some of the central Aleutians, but there's going to be rain on the Gulf side, and the fetch distance isn't quite up. So Thursday's sea states are not going to be real big in the Gulf, but again, with the northerly fetch in the Bering Sea, they're going to start building. And then get a load of all those lines on the map on the coal side of that trough that's associated with that 970 millibar low well south of Kodiak. That means that the winds are going to be really increasing there. Again, the fetch distance in the Bering Sea is not very long, so we're going to build up a lot of sea, but it's not going to be as big as it would as if there was no ice edge to start the wind waves way up to the north. In the meantime, you're going to really start seeing that wind, the sea state crank up in the Gulf of Alaska. Lots of southeast wind to go along with that on Friday. And so here's our Thursday's marine forecast. 10 to 15 knots on the outside waters for southeast Alaska, seas up to 4 feet. 10 knots on the inside with seas around 2 feet or so. But watch how it increases. On Friday, boy, those seas build right up into the teens. We've even got gale force easterlies off of Cape Suckling, and then 25 to 30 knots with plenty of southeast wind and east wind all along the outer coast. And then on the inside waters, 15 to 20 knots and seas up to 7 feet for Clarence Strait. So for south central waters, again, not a whole lot going on. Starting to feel the easterlies that are associated with that low that's well to the south. 20 to 30 knots, about 35 knots for Kennedy Entrance in the Barren Islands. 15 up to 30 knots for Cook Inlet. Seas up to around 9 feet, well in the south part, but notice 4 feet. And by the way, there's no sea ice in Cook Inlet, so you have all of the fetch that's available for the wind to build up wind waves. But then Friday, whole gales, 45 knots on the outer coast of South Central, and look at how much those seas built, up to 18 feet, and there's a lot of fetch. Some of that will be a southeast to south swell, but a lot of it's going to be wind wave, very short period, very nasty sea out there. Then for Prince William Sound, easterlies 25, seas 5 feet, and then 25 to 30 knots for much of Cook Inlet. But then as you get down around Augustine Island, it's going to be easterly 40 knots and seas 13 feet without a lot of fetch distance. So then for the Peninsula and Kodiak Island, there's our easterly showing up around 25 to 30 knots for most of the Gulf and Pacific side. But in the Bering Sea side, 20 knots from Bristol Bay on down to Chignik and Perryville. But then, as you get off of Coal Bay, you start to see a gale, 35 knots, sea 7 feet, where you got more fetch distance to build up that sea. Now for Friday. So we've got a lot of gales, 35 knots, a few areas with 25 knots and 30 knots, but on the Gulf and Pacific side, seas up to about 13 feet or so, still hasn't hit that big fetch of southeasterly swell yet to move into that area. But the northerlies on the other side, now down off of Coal Bay, a gale 35 knots, seas 13 feet. So the sea's built up pretty good, even though the fetch distance off the ice isn't very long. So now for the Aleutian chain. Starting out, we've got gales in the east and relatively lesser wind as you move farther west. Seas up to 11 feet on the Pacific side and up to 12 feet on the Bering Sea side generally have a west and north component to the winds. But Friday's going to be a lot more northerlies. Whole gales, 35 knots off of Nikolsky and Unalaska. And that carries right across the islands and out into the Pacific. Seas up to 20 feet as you get down off of Unimak Island. But as you go further out, quite a bit less sea with a bit less wind. And again, just not a lot of buildup there. So for the West Coast, generally over ice, until you get down to the Pribilofs, wind 25 knots there, small craft advisory with seas 7 feet. But 15 to up to 25 knots off of Cape, 25 knots off of Cape Newenham, but still there's enough ice that the wind is just not building up any sea. And so for Friday's forecast now we've got a lot of northerlies, 30 knots as you're near shore on up to St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew, and the Nunivak Island. 30 knots though, with a lot of snow coming down, so that's not going to be good visibility at all. But now look at the Pribilofs. Whole gale, 45 knots, and seas 15 feet. So there's plenty of fetch. Now, the further west you get, you're further away from that ice edge, you've got time for those wind waves to build up. So now for the Arctic coast. 5 to 15 knots. Norton Sound is the big one with 15 knots. Otherwise, 5 to 10 really almost everywhere. Things start to ramp up a little bit. Norton Sound now brisk wind advisory, 25 knots over the ice. Also for St. Lawrence Island waters, 25 knots. But then as you get up and around, now the easterlies start to pick up 20 to around 15 knots or so. In the Chukchi Sea, only 10 knots. So that's it for your marine forecast. Please, if you have to go out on the water, do let everybody know where you're going to go, and please be safe out there. Thanks for tuning in today.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.